Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to talk about cloud certifications and why they typically don't create real-world architects. Now, I'm not going to say cloud certifications aren't great. They are. They serve a purpose, but an architect skill really can't be learned in a certification, and we're going to talk about why that is today. My name is Mike Gibbs. I'm the CEO of Go Cloud Careers, and I've been an architect of all kinds for more than 25 years now. Network architect, enterprise architect, business architect. If there's an architect role, I promise you I've done it. And I'm also here with David Linthicum, who's been an architect even longer than I have, and he's taken all kinds of roles. He's an expert architect on cloud as well as generative AI. And today, David and I are going to talk about what certifications are, what they're really good for, and why they're not typically great for architects. So I'll start out with why I like certifications personally. I enjoy certifications because they add a really nice stamp of approval on your resume, and they can actually help you get an interview. And to me, in the job market, being able to look more attractive and stand out to get that job interview is a wonderful gift that we get for certifications. But the problem is the certifications are often mislabeled. For example, the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert, or the Google Professional Cloud Architect. Here's what's taught in here. The names of proprietary services, which in many cases we can't use in a multi-cloud architecture, and 98% of organizations are multi-cloud, or how to configure or administer the architecture. But the problem is, we architects don't configure anything. That's left for the engineering team. I can't use the name of a proprietary service with my customer. If I walked in a CIO's room and talked about him as about his EC2 instances or his compute engine instances, he'd politely escort me out of the building by security. But that CIO will understand about their virtual machines or their object storage or their block storage or file storage. But that's the reason. Plus, David, I'm going to start with you because people are used to hearing from me. What do you do in a day as an architect? What kind of things do you actually do?
Lots of meetings with peoples and human beings, and writing communications out, meeting with teams, and communicating with them what the expectations are in terms of the next version of a product or a service or a security. Having a conversation with the security team on different security requirements that are coming down the line and how things need to change. Talking to the networking team to make sure that they understand that there's going to be a spike in need for bandwidth with this application augmentation that you're doing, which is going to be just 2 months away, and they need to make sure that the infrastructure is on board within the data center to hold it up. And by the way, here's the bandwidth requirements, that new bandwidth requirements we have to make this happen. Talking with the database team, talking about compliance situations and the ability to comply to new changes to the laws. And then meeting with the C-level team in the executive boardroom to talk to them about the metrics and the progress that you're making on the latest generative AI system that they wanted you to build 6 months ago, which is supposed to be changing the state of the business. So it's like that.
Yeah, and David, I agree 100% of those same skills that I do as an architect. I meet with people, I write documents, I meet with executives, I learn their business needs, I learn their pain points, I learn their challenges. I also respond to RFIs, RFPs, and RFQs. I read a lot of thought leadership documents, and I know I see you do it every day. I give a tremendous amount of presentations, both at conferences and to client executives. Pretty much the only thing I don't do as an architect is what's taught in the certification, which is how to implement the technology.
That's absolutely right. I mean, it's certifications only get you part of the way down the road. They're very tactical knowledge base, and I think they are needed. We're going to have people
Yes.
who understand the particular technologies in the narrow, but the ability to understand technologies in wide and how that technology sits in the context of everything else, how that technology sits in context of how you're solving the business problem. That's often missed. And so people come out of these certifications with very narrow sets of technologies, understanding of technology. Normally it's a particular brand and a typical subsystem, but those things are going to change over time. The needs are going to change over time. We're going to use different technologies and different purposes. And your ability to do that is going to be your value to the business. It's not your ability to show up day one and be a AWS security identity management expert. We certainly need that for a certain amount
Yeah.
of time, but that's going to change over time. So you need to understand how that technology exists in the context of everything else. You can't silo your skills, and the companies don't want to silo your skills.
Yeah, and that's the key. It's more for the architect of understanding how the tech works. What happens if I type www.gocloudcareers.com on my browser? Once I click the browser and enter that URL, what happens? The architect needs to know everything of what happens because they're going to design these systems. So whether it's the PC doing a DNS lookup, or the PC doing an ARP, or the PC looking at its routing table, the architect needs to know how all that works, but not how to build it. How to build it is a very critical skill. And we need people to put these designs together, but it's not what we do. But I still like certifications because they do enhance your brand to a certain degree. Now, the other thing that concerns me when I deal with a lot of people with a lot of certifications is they tend to be very biased. Whatever's in that certification, that's what they're in. I learned about this little security thing. It was in my certification, and it may or may not be what's right for the customer, but they're biased to like it until proven otherwise, because that's what people know. What do people do? They like. My wife said this to me many years ago. She said, if you go to the hairdresser, they're going to tell you need a haircut. If you go to the cardiologist, they're going to tell you need an EKG. If you go to a massage therapist, they're going to tell you they need a massage. And that's okay. That's, where we all start looking at things. But to me, I want people to know how to design the systems, know how to lead the team that's going to design it, know how to present it, know how to build the business case, get involved in there. So I agree with you that certifications still have their value. Now, personally, I like to see 2 to 3 high-level professional certifications on a resume because I think that actually enhances the client's value. And it could be one of the professional cloud architect certifications. It could be a security certification like a CISSP. It could be a networking thing like a CCIE. It could be, something related to anything really related, but something to show the wide variety of the skill set. But what I don't like to see is someone that's got 10 different certifications in DevOps and SysOps and development and something else and something else and something else, and they want to be hired as an architect, and they've got skills and everybody else's job other than the one they want. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Mike. I mean, I call them certification collectors,
Yeah.
and I interview them all the time. And I think that's fine. I understand why they're doing it, and they're to be commended for
Yes.
learning different technologies and enhancing their career. But again, this is a big world. You're
Mhm.
not going to be able to get certified in everything and every piece of technology out there. So your ability to understand a particular space is as important as you're having a certification in the space. I can
Yes.
get a certification to be an AWS database engineer where I'm dealing with DynamoDB, as a core skill. And we certainly need people around who understand that tactical skill to
Yeah.
work. But if you have an understanding how object databases work in general and how databases work, relational databases, hierarchical databases, purpose-built in-memory databases, and you have that understanding, which is not going to normally be found in a particular certification,
No.
but you're going to be an autodidact and you're going to go out and learn that technology. You're going to take an architecture course, which is going to teach you how all those things kind of work and play well together, and then expand that out into networking, expand that out into AI, expand that out into security. And your ability to stretch and get to, and what I call do uncomfortable acts, your ability to learn things you don't think you need to know, but you should, is going to be something that's going to amplify your career. So the certifications are something I would encourage people to do. And you just mentioned the way
Yeah.
I would do it. Get your job that way, because in many cases, HR people, they don't look at overall value of a person. They look at a check mark certification. If they have that certification, and they'll hire you. In many instances, the cloud providers who provide these certifications, the technology providers, will work with hiring managers so they can hire people directly out of the certification. You got your job. Okay. Now you need to expand your knowledge into other silos and other things that you do. You need to be hungry to understand how all these things kind of work and play well together. That's going to make you much more valuable. If you
Yeah.
hold on to a particular certification and you're only solving problems with that particular piece of technology, you're likely not being able to deliver the value back to the business. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing your job as an employee. So it has to be a representative of the employee, has an understanding of the business, understanding holistically how all of these things kind of work and play well together. That's where you get to the value point in your technology. People are going to pay you more. They're going to respect you more. You're going to be higher in the organization. I think you're going to have more job satisfaction as well.
Yeah, and that's where I've seen, a long time ago, it was like you get a certification, you get a job. Now, people get 6 certifications, but they still lack the skills. They're not clearing the interviews. Now, what you said was the best way to get through it, and it's how actually I did every certification. When I read the certification and they talk about a technology, they mention one word, and then they spend 3 or 4 pages teaching you how to configure it. That one word that I didn't know, I would go look it up. And whether it was the specification, say the request for comments, or whether it was vendor documentation from an IBM, a Cisco, a Microsoft, by the time I read it, okay, I understood it. And then I read the next couple of pages in the certification guidebook, and then I'd probably read another 500 pages to support what was on 3 pages that I didn't understand. And then being an autodidactic, you learn a lot that way, and I like that. So again, I think people should get certifications. I think they should. And I think they should get big ones and not little ones, but I think it should be focused in their career. So an architect needs to understand architecture, not sysops, because that's not their job. And I'd rather someone that, in architects, it's kind of this weird kind of career. We kind of have to have a wide base of knowledge, and we can't afford to get too deep on it. But it's a wide base of knowledge in our career and our skills versus a wide base of knowledge in everybody else's careers. That's where I see people go wrong. It really upset me. And one of the reasons I started this company is I had interviewed 1,000 AWS certified people. And I asked them very basic questions. The first thing I asked was, what was cloud computing? What is cloud computing? And I couldn't get a definition for more than 2 of them. I then asked them, explain to me how S3 actually works at the object storage level. Almost no one could answer it. I then said, okay, for a direct connection, you need BGP. How does BGP operate? How does it select a path? I couldn't get an answer for it. And then I said, what use cases would DynamoDB not be appropriate for my environment when I need a NoSQL database? Here was the scary thing. All I got was DynamoDB is the greatest thing in the world. And I said, what? And I try to hint at it. What happens if you have a multi-cloud architecture? Oh, you don't want to do that. You don't need that. And I'm like, okay. So that was the concern I have. Not the certification itself. There's a lot of valuable things in there, and people do need to know how to build it. Maybe not so much architects, but the engineering team. So I still like certifications. And I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, as the expression says. And I encourage my clients to get 2 to 3. 1 professional cloud certification, typically a TOGAF. I don't really care which one it is, but some kind of architecture framework. And I like that because it keeps people thinking about the job. And whether it's Zachman or TOGAF, it doesn't matter to me. But at least they're thinking, hey, start with the business vision. Yeah, figure that out. Figure out how the business operates. Figure out the present tech and the future tech. And at least it has people thinking in business context as opposed to, oh, this is my favorite tech. I love it. So, yeah, so all the things you described are things that someone needs to learn. And they could get that certification, and they could do what we call Certifications Plus. Get your certification, then learn system design, then learn business acumen, then learn leadership, then CXO relevancy. And that's how we actually train everybody. We give them both. So for people that want to actually become architects, in addition to getting certified, what other skills do you think they should learn?
I think it should look written and communication skills. I mean, I'll tell you what, that was the toughest thing for me to do. I'm dyslexic, and I got out of college. I couldn't write, couldn't articulate myself very well. And when I got into positions where I was moving into more leadership positions, that became a skill that I needed to have. And so those would be where I would focus on the ability to look at other general skills, such as databases in the general, databases in the wide, security in the wide, your ability to understand governance in the wide, cloud computing in the wide. So it's not a specific skill and talent, but we're learning a lot of stuff about a lot of things, and we're having enough understanding where we can have an intelligent conversation. That doesn't mean you're trying to pretend to be an expert in a particular siloed technology, but that just means that I know that this is a database. I know it's an object database, it has these characteristics, it does these things well and these things not so well, and I can put it into context of stuff. Also, I know to open up my understanding of databases to encompass every database that's out there, whether it's on premise or in the cloud, not having a particular favorite database that we're looking to leverage. That's the biggest issue we have out there right now, is that people come at this with what they know. I understand why that is. That's a
Yeah.
human characteristic. However, what you know may be different than what you need. And your
Yes.
ability to understand the difference is going to be the difference between you adding value to the particular systems you're building. Are you building something that's going to be tremendously under optimized and is going to not have the value that the business needs it for it to have? And I think those mistakes are being made all the time. They always end up with something that works. I can take DynamoDB and apply it into every database scenario known to man and probably force fit it in the majority of cases, but it's going to cost 10 times as much because I'm forcing it into situations where it's not necessarily apt for that particular use case. So understanding what databases are, understanding the different technologies out there, also understanding when you need to do more research. Now, in other words,
Yeah.
I know this is a security problem. I'm going to go ahead and look at what this is and what what the breadth of technology is, what the vendors are out there, and where the trends are moving these days in a general way. Versus okay, I need to figure out and I'm going to get certified in this particular identity management technology and spend 3 months doing that. That's not going to help anybody in terms of you
No.
understanding the larger solution. So we have to think in the wide more so than thinking in the narrow, even though I don't mind people thinking in the narrow if they need to focus on a particular piece of technology. But you don't understand that you're thinking in the right narrow, in the right silo, unless you're understanding how to think in have a breadth of understanding of everything that's going on in the space. And that requires you to know a little about a lot of stuff. And that's what architects do. And it's not getting bogged down in the details, and it's definitely not getting bogged down in the certification. And it's definitely approaching this with an open mind where all technology solutions are on the table.
Yeah, and I like to tell people when they ask me which cloud I should learn, I like to say, would you learn to drive a Toyota or would you learn to drive a car? Look, I love a Toyota. My wife has one. They're a great car. But what use would it be to go to school to specifically learn to drive one kind of car and learn the wacky terminology they would make for it? An elastic rotational vector changer, for example, instead of a steering wheel. And it's the same thing. If people learn the cloud, if they truly understand what is a virtual machine, what is a container, what are the storage area networks, what a database is, relational, no SQL, how do they work? When do you use them? When do you use a load balancer versus a reverse proxy versus an application load balancer versus a network load balancer versus an API gateway? At that point, you kind of know what to do no matter where you're at. And not only you also have the knowledge to architect it because you understand how those systems actually work. Also, I think there's a major leadership component people don't understand. So, how many architectures do you design by yourself, David, as opposed to leading a team of specialists?
0.
Okay. I've designed 0 architectures myself in the last 25 years. Every architecture I have is got a security architect, an IAM architect. I bring some DevOps engineers. I bring some cloud engineers. If I'm not functioning as a network architect, I bring a network architect. I bring an application architect. I bring project managers to make sure everything's done on time. It's that. And that to me takes leadership skills to be able to build those teams on demand, entice those people to work for you, not only deliver the project on success and then rewarding or taking care of the people that work for you by either helping them get promoted or helping them grow in their careers. So you would agree this is not a one-man person. This is a team sport where we've got multiple people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, and all special skill sets.
Absolutely. You got to be able to lead a team. You have to be able to motivate people, and you get things done normally through people. And also, they're going to be your extensions of knowledge. In other words, you know you need a network, but the type and the configuration of the network needs to be outsourced to a networking engineer who can tell you exactly what
Yeah.
you need and how to live up to those expectations. And the same goes with the other disciplines: security, governance, documentations, business analysts, things like that. And those teams may change based on the solution you're trying to build, but you're always going to rely on a number of people who are going to help you move to a particular solution. And they're going to have more narrow skills. They're going to be more value to you because you're not going to be able to get down in the weeds on that particular piece of technology. So you're going to rely on a talented person to be your network engineer of choice, security engineer of choice, things like that, or even security architect of choice that can direct a security engineer who's actually carrying out a lot of the details, but someone who's carrying out the security architecture unto itself, which is a thing, and understands how all these things work and play well together and fit together, and can make the configuration and make sure you're using the right vendors and the right technology providers, and then getting the people who have the particular skills and how that technology should be implemented. So this hierarchy of leadership is a real important thing when you deal with technology. You can't be an expert in everything. If you're trying to do that, you're going to fail. So you need to understand a little of a lot of stuff, and you need to be able to get things done through people. And part of the success of being an architect is your ability to pick the right talent, hire the right talent, maintain the right talent, and foster them as someone you can carry from project to project. You talk to anybody who's a successful architect who works at a major consulting firm, they're going to tell you that they deal with the same 10 to 15 people on each and every project because they get their team. These are the dream team, and what we're able to do. We may have to shift some talent, some capabilities around as we move to different projects with different needs. But the reality is everybody knows their place. Everybody functions as a team. And you need to have the architect as the team leader that makes everybody march in the right direction, as the project planning, make sure the resources are there, and make sure everything's happy. So you have to wear a lot of hats. But I think that's a good thing. That's a fun thing. I think that your ability to motivate people to get things done is a challenge unto itself. Now, even though some of this stuff may not relate to technology, it relates to communications, relates to your presence as an executive. It's going to have a much better, much more enjoyable career if you start moving in this direction versus just focusing on technology. That's going to change. Whatever technology you're focusing on, I don't care how good it is. In the next 3 or 4 years, it's going to shift some way. Some other things are going to be important. It's going to be, demoted down in the priority level. You don't want to tie yourself to a particular brand, a particular service. You want to tie yourself to a particular expertise, a particular discipline. So when people ask you, what you do, you're not saying, well, I'm a DynamoDB SME, and I work on DynamoDB databases. It's going to be, I'm a database engineer. I'm a database architect. I'm a security engineer. I'm a security architect. You can define explicitly what you do, and it should never have a product name in the list. If it does, you're moving in the wrong direction. And so you need to move to more generalized understanding of the space in general. And as you start moving through your career, you move up another layer and move up another layer. So you move from a security engineer to a security architect to a architect, and someone who's guiding everything and understands it in different aspects of the system. And in many instances, that may be changing your roles. You may be a security architect here, and you change to a database architect and learn things about database architecture and how you do it. Then move into network architecture and understand how that works. And by doing that, you're going to understand deeper layers of technology, but you're also going to expand your use and your knowledge of different systems. Then when people come to you and they say, what are the likely patterns that I need to look at, my meta patterns, my meta architecture patterns, need to look at for this particular problem, you'll be able to lay them out, understanding that you have to do the research and the things behind the scene. But generally speaking, what comes to bear to solve these issues. As far as what specific technology, that's easy to figure out. If you understand the business, you understand the problems you're looking to solve, and you're figuring out the meta architecture around it, that's 90% of the problem, in my opinion.
And to me, it's 90% of the problem. You highlighted two incredible things there. One was, don't tie yourself to a vendor name, tie yourself to a technology or problem solving. The other one that is really important is you can't learn everything, and if you try, you fail. I heard you say that. So I'm going to take all that list, and I'm going to harmonize your list, which you just talked about, with the list that I typically talk about, and it's the same list. It's CXO relevancy, because if we don't know how to communicate to the C-suite, we lose everything. It's business acumen, because our whole role is about optimizing business performance, and if you don't have knowledge about business, you can't do it. It's leadership skills, because neither David nor I, in 55 plus years of architecture experience, have ever designed an architecture as one person. It's always a team. It's the ability to sell, because we've got to convince our clients to actually adopt our architecture. And if they don't, we've got beautiful PowerPoint and Word documents. You mentioned executive presence, which is critical to be taken seriously. And you also talked about having good, strong knowledge of technology fundamentals and how different technology systems can solve various problems. Did I summarize that well?
You summarized that great, Mike.
Okay, so, now you've heard it from me. You've heard it many times. You've also heard it from David. We've been architects at every level. I'm sure David's been an application architect, a cloud architect, an AI architect, and I've been a network architect, a business architect. a cloud architect, an enterprise architect. I'm sure David was I know David was an enterprise architect too. So you can see we're talking about, all these architecture careers over more time than either one of us would like to admit. So go out there and get your architecture career. Realize that certification can and will build your brand, and go get it. But don't limit yourself to certification. Make sure you get that certifications plus. Make sure you maximize those business skills as well as an understanding of the underlying technology so you can work anywhere, because you never know where your option is going to be. If you truly understand databases, you can work for a bank, you can work for Amazon, you can work for Microsoft, you can work for Google, you can work for Oracle, you can work for anybody in the world. But if you only know a cloud provider's proprietary systems, there's only one place you can work, that cloud provider. And personally, I would like to have companies all over the world fight for me, as opposed to being only able to work for a single company and hope that they need me at the time I'm looking for a job.
Absolutely. 100%, Mike.
David, as always, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our community. I know I appreciate it, and our community appreciates it as well. Look forward to doing another one with you sometime real soon.
You got it, Mike. Everybody take care.